My daughter called me at midnight crying. She said, "Come and save me, Dad. I'm hungry, tired, and drained." I quickly ran over to her, and what happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Simon Cooper from California. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I was half asleep when the phone rang, its sharp trill cutting through the quiet hum of my bedroom fan. The clock read 12:07 a.m. I rubbed my eyes, confused, until I saw her name on the screen, Leah? My daughter. My first instinct was panic. She never called this late. I answered instantly, heart already racing, only to hear her sobbing on the other end. "Dad," she whispered, "come and save me. I'm hungry, tired, and drained." Her voice was cracking, like a girl again, like the little girl who used to call me when she had nightmares about monsters in the closet. Something in me tightened. "Where are you?" I asked. She gave me her address, her voice trembling. I threw on jeans, grabbed my keys, and left without thinking. My brain hadn't caught up with my body yet. I was just a father trying to rescue his daughter. The drive was a blur of red lights and bad thoughts. My mind ran wild with scenarios. Was she being abused? Did Daniel hit her? Was she trying to leave and had nowhere else to go? God, I should have kept a closer eye on her. We hadn't talked in months, not really. Our conversations had turned into dry, obligatory exchanges. But now, with that broken voice in my ear, none of that mattered. I sped down the freeway, rehearsing what I'd say to her. "You're safe now, maybe." Or, "I'm here. It's over." Something soft. Something fatherly. I needed her to know she could always come back home, that there was still a place for her with me, no matter how far she'd strayed. When I got to the address she'd given, it wasn't some shady motel or emergency shelter like I expected. It was a gated townhouse complex, the kind of place you had to buzz into. I pulled up, and before I could even park, the gate opened like they'd been expecting me. I walked through slowly, cautiously, still trying to piece together what the hell was going on. The door to one of the units swung open, and there she stood, Leah, in a silk robe, makeup perfectly done, not a tear in sight. Daniel was behind her, lounging like a cat with cream. My gut sank like a stone. The living room lights were on, wine glasses on the table, and a stack of documents beside them. Something wasn't right. "Dad," she said, voice soft but not broken. "Thanks for coming." I stepped inside, confused, and she gestured toward the couch. "Sit. We need to talk." My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I stayed. For her. Always for her. Daniel slid a folder across the coffee table. "We want you to sign over the company," he said, casual as if asking for a Netflix password. My jaw tightened. "What?" I asked, blinking, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Leah reached for my hand. "Dad, this is your chance to prove that you love me," she said. "To show that you trust me. You always said the company was for me one day." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something hollow behind her eyes. Not fear, not desperation, just calculation. All those sleepless nights I spent building that company, every missed recital, every family dinner sacrificed, it all replayed in my head. I started that business with nothing but a secondhand laptop and $26 in my account. It grew because I bled for it, because I believed I was building something for the people I loved, for her. And now she was trading that love for leverage. She wasn't asking. She was manipulating. And Daniel? He just sat there smugly, sure I'd fold like a lawn chair. I exhaled slowly, nodded, and picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I didn't stutter. I signed the papers with a signature that looked almost perfect, almost. But I left just enough wrong in it to make it legally invalid. I smiled at Daniel, then at Leah. "There," I said, handing the pen back. "It's done." She looked relieved. He looked triumphant. But inside, I felt dead. Not because I tricked them. Because I had to. Because my daughter stood before me and chose to betray me for profit, and all I could do was play along. As I drove home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the road, trying to remember when I lost her. Maybe it was after her mother died, when I got so consumed with work. Or maybe it was when Daniel came into the picture, slick and charming, with just enough ambition to impress her and just enough greed to ruin her. Either way, the girl who once asked me to dance with her at school functions was gone. In her place stood a woman I barely recognized, one who used my love as a bargaining chip. By the time I got home, I'd already called Mark, my lawyer, and told him what happened. She tried to pull a fast one, I said flatly. Get the police involved. I want them both arrested for fraud and coercion. Have them meet at the company tomorrow morning. Let's end this properly. Mark didn't ask questions. He knew I wouldn't say this unless I meant it. And I meant it. God help me, I did. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the sun rise through my blinds, feeling the weight of 30 years of fatherhood collapse inside me. The thing they never tell you about being a parent is that sometimes loving your child means letting them fall hard. It means choosing self-respect over unconditional acceptance. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let her destroy what I built just to feed someone else's greed, not even if it broke me in the process. When Leah was 10, she came home from school with a scraped knee and a story about how a boy had pushed her during recess. She was furious, not because she was hurt, but because nobody did anything about it. I remember how her little hands curled into fists as she told me, "You always said to stand up for myself, Daddy. But what if nobody listens?" That night, I marched into her school and raised hell. I wasn't a loud man, never was, but something about seeing her doubt her own worth lit a fire in me I couldn't put out. I made the principal apologize to her in person, and afterward, she looked up at me and said, "I feel powerful when you fight for me." That sentence stuck with me for years. I didn't realize then how dangerous those words would become. She didn't feel loved, she felt powerful, and somewhere along the way, she started mistaking one for the other. By the time she turned 17, our bond had become a little more fragile. She'd always been bright, but now she was also headstrong in a way that sometimes veered into defiance. She started keeping secrets, small ones at first. Then came the lies. "I was at Lisa's," she'd say, when I knew she wasn't. "It's just a party," she'd insist, when I could smell alcohol on her breath. I chalked it up to adolescence. Every parent goes through this, right? But in my gut, I knew Leah was different. Her rebellions weren't careless. They were calculated. She wasn't looking for freedom. She was testing how far she could push before I pushed back. Still, I gave her everything. Every tutoring session she needed, every late-night drive to her part-time job, every vacation she asked for, just to keep her close. After her mother passed, I made it my mission to overcompensate. If I couldn't give her a two-parent household, I'd give her stability, comfort, and love in overwhelming doses. I paid for college up front, no loans. Sent her money without her asking. Even when I noticed the shift in tone, her voice colder, her thank yous less frequent, I told myself it was stress or grief. I never let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was growing into someone I couldn't recognize anymore. Then came Daniel. From the first moment I met him, I knew something was off. He was charming, almost too charming. The type who looked you in the eye just long enough to pretend he cared, but always had a finger twitching near his phone. He called me sir for all of 2 weeks before it turned into pops and big man. Leah laughed every time, said I was being too stiff, too traditional. But I wasn't laughing. I'd seen men like him before, slick talkers with empty resumes and big dreams backed by no discipline. He had a new business idea every month and nothing ever launched. I tried warning her, gently at first. She said I was being controlling. Then I tried pulling back support. She said I was punishing her for growing up. The more I tried to guide her, the more she slipped into his orbit. The real rift came 2 years ago, when I offered her a junior executive role at the company. It was symbolic, mostly. I wanted her to learn the ropes, get her hands dirty, understand what it meant to run something that fed over 200 employees and their families. But she turned it down, said she wasn't interested in corporate slavery. I remember standing there, papers in my hand, wondering what I'd done wrong. That was the first time I felt like a stranger in my own legacy. And she didn't even look back as she left my office. After that, our relationship became transactional. She called when she needed money. I gave it. She visited on holidays, sometimes. I didn't push. I kept hoping she'd come around. That one day she'd realize what she was walking away from. That one day she'd want to know more about the foundation I'd laid for her future. But that day never came. And so when she called at midnight crying, some part of me lit up, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. Maybe this meant she wanted to come home. That hope died the moment I saw the contract. The hours after I signed with the fake signature were tense. My phone didn't ring. Leah didn't check in. Neither did Daniel. They probably thought I was too stupid to notice the manipulation, or too sentimental to retaliate. I could almost hear the conversation they must have had after I left. He actually did it? Daniel probably asked, grinning. Told you he would, she replied, smug. He always folds when it's about me. But they didn't know me like they thought they did. Not anymore. Something in me had shifted the moment I put pen to paper. I wasn't just signing a fake name. I was drawing a line in blood. By morning, I was in full motion. Mark had contacted the DA's office. Fraud was a strong enough charge, but we had the added bonus of attempted coercion. It helped that Leah had called and lured me there under false pretenses. Her own words would work against her. The video footage from my home security system showed the timestamp on her call, and the audio files confirmed the content. We had enough for a warrant. Enough to make a statement. I made sure they'd be served right at the front doors of the company. I wanted it to be public. I wanted everyone to see what entitlement looked like when it hit a brick wall. But that didn't mean I felt good. I sat in my car for over an hour before going into the office. I stared at the steering wheel, thinking about Leah's third-grade art project, the one where she made a little clay version of our house, and said, "This is where I always feel safe." I thought about her senior prom, when she cried because her date bailed, and I took her instead, slow danced with her under fairy lights while her friends clapped. I thought about the letters she used to write me on Father's Day, before they turned into text messages, then silence. That morning, I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't a business owner. I was just a father walking into a storm he didn't want but could no longer avoid. The kind of storm that tears through everything you thought was sacred and leaves behind only what was real. The sky was overcast that morning, with thick, gray clouds rolling in like they'd been summoned for the occasion. I remember watching them gather outside my office window as I sipped the first coffee I'd managed to stomach in over 24 hours. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt like I was holding a match too close to something I once loved and watching it catch fire. And still, I didn't flinch. The receptionist called at 9:03 a.m., "Sir," she said, voice tight. "Your daughter and her husband are here. They're asking for access to the boardroom." I exhaled slowly, set down my cup, and said calmly, "Let them wait. Security knows what to do." Downstairs, Leah and Daniel walked into the lobby like royalty. She wore a fitted black blazer, hair sleek, makeup precise. He was in a tailored gray suit, sunglasses still on despite being indoors. According to what security later told me, Daniel actually winked at one of the receptionists and said, "Big changes coming, sweetheart." It made my stomach turn. They thought this was the coronation of their new empire. They had no idea the executioner was already sharpening his blade. They barely made it 5 feet past the reception desk when 2 uniformed officers stepped forward. "Leah Monroe and Daniel Brooks?" one asked, hand resting on the holster. Leah blinked, confused, her smile fading like a spotlight dimming. "Yes," she said. Daniel frowned. "What's going on?" The officer pulled out a folder and flipped it open. "You're both under arrest for attempted fraud, forgery, and coercion with intent to defraud a private enterprise." Gasps echoed around the lobby. Employees stopped mid-conversation. One woman dropped her coffee. "What the hell is this?" Daniel barked, stepping back. "You can't be serious." But it was Leah's face I watched on the security feed. The color drained from her cheeks. No, there's a mistake," she stammered. "My dad." He signed, "Ma'am," the officer said, cutting her off. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." They cuffed her before she could finish the sentence. Her arms went stiff, her lips trembled, and she turned her face away from the phones now recording from several curious onlookers. I watched it all from the 10th floor, my heart beating like a war drum, my hands clenched into fists. They were escorted out the front doors in full view of staff, interns, and news crews who just happened to be nearby, thanks to a few well-placed anonymous tips. I didn't want revenge. I wanted consequence. I wanted everyone to see that betrayal has a price, even if it comes wearing your daughter's face. And maybe, deep down, I wanted Leah to feel what it was like to be helpless, to understand what it meant to break something you thought would always catch you. Back in my office, I sat alone, surrounded by silence. The chairs still faced the window. The air conditioning hummed, but everything felt different. I should have felt satisfied, but all I could think about was the way Leah used to run into this office as a kid, spinning in my chair, asking to press all the buttons on the landline. She used to leave sticky notes on my desk that read, "I love you, Daddy." I kept one in the drawer. That morning, I pulled it out. It was faded and curled at the edges, but the handwriting was unmistakable. That little girl didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. The phones didn't stop ringing. Some calls were from board members wanting to know what the hell just happened. Others were from family members who'd caught wind of the arrest. My sister, Ruth, called around noon. "You really had your daughter arrested?" she asked. "No, hello. No, how are you?" "She's not a criminal, David. She's your child." I took a long breath. "She is a criminal, Ruth. She tried to steal my company. She lured me under false pretenses and pushed a fraudulent contract. I'm not making this up." Ruth sighed. "You always did love that business more than your family." That hit me harder than I expected. After I hung up, I sat in silence. Was that true? Had I prioritized the company over my daughter? Or had I simply confused providing for her with parenting her? Maybe the real failure wasn't letting her go, but letting her believe she could act without consequence. I spent decades shielding her from pain, from disappointment, from the sting of failure. I thought I was protecting her. But maybe I was just delaying her reckoning. And now it had arrived with the force of handcuffs and court dates. Later that evening, I got the call I'd been expecting. From jail. Leah's voice came through the line, small and desperate. "Dad," she said, "please, that wasn't what you think. Daniel told me it was just symbolic. That you'd be okay with it." I didn't know he was actually going to. I hung up before she could finish. I knew that voice too well. It was the same voice she used when she got caught lying in high school. When she crashed my car and said, "I didn't mean to." Always a reason. Always a scapegoat. Always someone else's fault. I blocked the number after that. Not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. If I didn't, I'd start to question myself. I'd start to think about her smile, her laugh, the little girl who used to climb into bed with me when thunder scared her. And I couldn't afford that. Not now. Not after everything. She'd made her decision. And so had I. That night, as I sat on my back porch sipping a glass of whiskey, the silence finally settled around me like a familiar coat. I looked up at the sky, still cloudy, still undecided, and realized something painful but freeing. I didn't fail as a father because I loved her. I failed because I kept loving her even when she stopped loving me the same way. And that kind of love, that blind, desperate love, it's the kind that gets you ruined. I wasn't going to let it ruin me anymore. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, unnatural, like the stillness in a room after someone has slammed the door and left. For 3 days, the phones at the house stayed quiet. No calls from Leah. No texts. No lawyers. The only sound was the soft buzz of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards under my pacing. I hadn't realized how loud a home could feel when it was filled with regret instead of voices. I went from checking the front door every hour to avoiding it altogether. Part of me kept expecting to hear her footsteps on the porch. The rest of me prayed I wouldn't. But the world didn't let me hide for long. Word of the arrest spread like gasoline on fire. It started with whispers in the boardroom, then jumped to the neighborhood, then landed on the local news cycle with a headline so absurd I had to reread it 3 times. CEO has daughter arrested in corporate betrayal scheme. The comments were brutal. People who didn't know me called me heartless. Others labeled Leah a spoiled brat. One forum called it the juiciest suburban scandal of the year. But none of that mattered. What mattered were the people who did know us. Family, old friends, neighbors. They started showing their faces again. And not in the way I wanted. My cousin Joel came by the house unannounced. I hadn't seen him in over a year, But suddenly he was standing on my porch like it was 1997 again, and we were still close. "Thought I'd check in," he said, his voice casual, but his eyes scanning me like I was a crime scene. We sat in the living room for a while, awkwardly. He sipped coffee. I didn't touch mine. Finally, he said, "Look, man, I get why you're mad, but jail? You really couldn't handle this privately." I turned to him, tired. Privately is how they planned to rob me. Publicly is how I chose to stop it. He shook his head like he pitied me. That pissed me off more than if he'd just called me a bastard to my face. The judgment kept coming. My sister Ruth refused to speak to me again. "I hope you're happy," she texted. "You've alienated the only child you have. Don't come crying when you're old and alone." I didn't respond. What could I say? That I didn't want to be alone, but I also didn't want to be used? That I loved Leah, but I refused to be her doormat anymore? That choosing myself, for once, felt like betrayal too? No one wanted to hear the complicated truth. They just wanted a simple villain. And that villain, apparently, was me. Even people at work changed. The hallway conversation stopped when I walked by. Some employees avoided eye contact, whispering about family business and dirty laundry. I didn't blame them. It's not every day you see your boss arrest his own blood. But what hurt most was the disappointment in people I once mentored. People who looked up to me not just as a leader, but as a man. I caught my head of HR, Camille, looking at me like I was a stranger. When I asked her to close the door during a meeting, she flinched, as if she thought I'd snap next. I started avoiding my office. I worked from home, buried in reports and contracts, anything to keep my mind from drifting. But it always drifted back to her. Leah's face the night I carried her home from her first broken heart. Her shriek of joy when I surprised her with a puppy for her 9th birthday. The way she used to draw hearts around my name in her notebooks. And now, those same hands that once reached for mine in fear had tried to strip me of everything I built. The betrayal wasn't just legal. It was spiritual. I got another letter from her during the second week. This time, it was handwritten, 2 pages, folded neatly, addressed simply as Dad. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the kitchen table for 3 days, taunting me every time I walked by. On the 4th morning, after a restless night, I finally read it. It was a mess of contradictions. She apologized, then blamed Daniel. Claimed she didn't know what she was signing. Said she missed me. Said she still hoped we could talk. Said prison wasn't what she expected. That she was scared. That she needed me. The letter ended with, "You always said you'd fight for me. Why won't you now?" I read it twice. Then I put it back in the envelope and tucked it into a drawer I never opened. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood what she didn't. Love isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's not immunity. It's not something you can twist into leverage. And I wasn't going to be the kind of father who teaches his child that they can do anything, even betray you, and still be rewarded with comfort. A few days later, Greg, my oldest friend, came over with beer and a heavy silence. We sat on the back porch like we used to, watching the wind move through the trees. He didn't say much, just cracked a bottle, handed it to me, and said, "You know this doesn't make you a monster, right?" I didn't answer. "She needed to learn," he added. "Actions have consequences. You did what she made you do." I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But all I could think about was the way she used to fall asleep in my lap during movie nights. The way she'd grip my pinky finger instead of my hand. "I'm not sure I taught her the right things," I said finally. Greg stared at the grass. "Maybe not," he said. "But at least now you're not teaching her the wrong ones." Silence isn't empty. It has a sound all its own. It hums, it hisses, it folds in around you until your own breathing becomes the loudest thing in the room. That's what the house became after the letter, the one I didn't answer. Just me, my thoughts, and the echo of a daughter who used to fill every corner of this place with her voice. It had been weeks since the arrest, and the public noise had started to die down, but the private storm inside me hadn't eased. Every day, I opened my eyes expecting to feel lighter, but instead, the weight only redistributed itself, settling in my shoulders, tightening behind my eyes, pressing against my ribs whenever I passed a photo of her on the mantel. By the 3rd week, another letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable, tight, slanted, panicked. I didn't open it. I placed it directly into the drawer with the first one, a quiet act of rebellion against the part of me that still wanted to forgive her. Because that part was still alive, wounded, bleeding, but alive. It would have been easy to pretend it didn't exist, to tell myself I was over her betrayal. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her at 5 years old, holding my hand in a grocery store, asking if I thought unicorns were real. I saw her dancing barefoot in the backyard during spring rain, laughing like joy was something you could catch if you were quick enough. I remembered those moments like someone mourning a person who hadn't died, but was never coming back. The letters kept coming, once a week, sometimes twice. She wrote about jail, about the noise, the routine, the meals, how Daniel was in a different wing and she hadn't spoken to him since the arraignment. She said she didn't miss him, that she saw now how he'd used her, manipulated her, that maybe she was weak, that maybe I was right. The apologies were always buried in the middle paragraphs, never at the start, never at the end, as if she couldn't quite bring herself to lead with guilt or close with humility. She wanted me to feel sorry for her, but not too sorry. She still had pride. Still believed a piece of me was soft enough to crack. And I was. God help me, I was. But every time I started to write her back, something stopped me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something colder, something more final. I'd pull out a notepad, stare at the blank page, and hear her voice from that night. This is your chance to prove you love me. That phrase looped like a broken record. It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in guilt. And it wasn't the first time she'd done that. When she was in high school and wanted to go to that summer camp in Europe, she cried and said, if Mom were alive, she'd let me. When she flunked her biology final in college, she blamed me for not paying for a tutor. It was always a script. If something went wrong, it was someone else's fault. And I kept letting her off the hook, thinking I was being a good father. But I wasn't teaching her to be accountable. I was teaching her that love erases all sins. One night, I sat outside with a letter in my hand, already torn open before I realized what I'd done. The words were frantic, more desperate than before. She talked about the cold, about a fight in the cafeteria she'd witnessed, about a girl in her cell who tried to take her own life. She wrote that she was scared, that she felt alone, that she missed me in ways she didn't know how to say. Please, Dad, it ended. Please just write back. Even if it's just to say you hate me. I held that letter against my chest, felt the paper tremble with my heartbeat. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. They'd dried up weeks ago, maybe even years ago. Instead, I wrote her a letter. I sat down and poured every thought onto that page. Pages, actually. I told her everything. That I loved her. That I hated what she did. That I didn't know how to look at her without seeing a stranger. That I blamed myself for coddling her, for protecting her from consequences. That I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. That I wanted peace, but didn't know if it could ever include her again. And at the end, I signed it simply Dad. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Then I tore it in half and dropped it into the fireplace. I watched the flames take it like they'd been waiting. That night, I didn't dream. I just laid awake, listening to the quiet. Not a peaceful quiet, but the kind that fills your chest like water when you're drowning. It was the sound of knowing you'd done the right thing, but still wishing it didn't hurt so much. I walked through the house around 3 a.m., turning off lights I didn't remember leaving on, adjusting picture frames I hadn't looked at in weeks. I paused at her old bedroom door. It was still painted the pale lavender she chose when she was 14. Inside, everything remained as she left it. The trophies, the posters, the framed photo of her and her mom. I didn't go in. I just stood there, hand on the knob, realizing that some doors you close don't ever truly lock. You just learn to stop opening them. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, though the air conditioning had that sharp, recycled chill, but in atmosphere. Everyone spoke in whispers, as if volume itself might be disrespectful. I sat near the back, behind a wall of strangers and reporters, my suit pressed, and my tie knotted tighter than usual. I hadn't planned to attend Leah's sentencing. I told myself it wasn't necessary, that the legal system would carry out its duty with or without my eyes on it. But something pulled me there. Maybe the last shred of fatherhood, or maybe the need to see this story all the way through to its bitter end. She entered in cuffs, wrists bound in front. wearing the standard beige uniform that drained the color from her skin. Her hair was longer, messier, her shoulders hunched. She looked like a shell of herself. No lipstick, no blazer, no performance. Just Leah, stripped of all artifice. She didn't see me at first. Her eyes darted to the floor, then to Daniel, who stood 2 rows away, not even glancing in her direction. Their body language said everything. Once co-conspirators, now strangers with matching criminal records. I wondered if betrayal felt different when it was mirrored back at her. If she saw, in him, the same cold abandonment she'd inflicted on me. The judge called the session to order. The charges were read aloud again, each syllable landing like a stone on my chest. Attempted fraud, forgery, coercion. It didn't matter how many times I heard it. I still flinched when her name was attached to those words. Leah Monroe, defendant, perpetrator. There was a time when her name and mine were spoken together with pride, on report cards, at graduation ceremonies, in father-daughter dance announcements. Now, they were connected through court transcripts and case numbers. When asked if she wanted to speak before sentencing, she stood slowly. The courtroom held its breath. "Your Honor," she began, voice steadier than I expected. "I accept responsibility for my actions." She paused, then added, "And I understand the pain I've caused, not just to my company, but to my family, to my father." Her voice cracked on the word father. She looked toward the crowd then, eyes searching. They landed on me. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just stared. It was the first honest look I'd seen from her in a long time. A look that said, "I know what I did. I know what I lost." The judge sentenced her to 2 years in prison with eligibility for parole in 9 months. Daniel got more, 3 years flat, no parole. His prior offenses did him no favors. When the gavel came down, Leah winced, but didn't break. She didn't beg, didn't scream. She simply nodded, turned, and let the officers guide her out. But as she passed my row, she slowed. Just enough to whisper, "I'm sorry, Dad." I heard it. So did the woman beside me. She gave me a look, half pity, half admiration. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just kept my hands folded and my face still. Because forgiveness wasn't something I could give in that moment. Maybe not ever. And I needed her to understand that some apologies, while sincere, don't earn you a second chance. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like gnats. I ignored them all. One young woman shoved a mic in my face, asking, "Do you think justice was served today?" I looked at her, really looked, and then said, "No sentence fixes betrayal. It just puts it in writing." I walked away after that. No further comments. No headlines I wanted to see. I just wanted to go home. To the silence. To the space I'd built back around myself like armor. That night, I went into Leah's room for the first time in over a year. I didn't plan to. My feet just carried me there, unthinking. The scent was gone. Whatever perfume or lotion she used to love had long faded. The lavender walls looked more childish now, almost surreal. I sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the bookshelf she never emptied. On it were relics of a girl who once adored me, scrapbooks, glitter pens, a music box I gave her when she turned 8. I wound it up. The tune played slow and broken, but it played. I closed my eyes and let it drift into the corners of the room like a memory made audible. I thought about the letter I'd burned, about the versions of Leah I kept locked in my head, the joyful one, the rebellious one, the deceitful one. And I realized something that stopped me cold. I was grieving someone who hadn't died, someone who could still change, but someone I couldn't let back in. Because love without boundaries is just self-destruction wrapped in sentimentality. Because proving you love someone doesn't mean saying yes. It means knowing when no is the only honest answer left. A few days later, I got a final letter from her. It was short. No excuses. No requests. Just a single line. "I understand now. I won't write again unless you ask me to." And for the first time, I felt a sliver of peace. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But acknowledgement. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that's all there ever was between us now. Life didn't go back to normal. It moved forward in a crooked line, with gaps where love used to live. But I learned to breathe in those gaps, to find comfort in my solitude. I stopped apologizing to myself for holding the line. I stopped wishing she'd knock on the door. I just lived. one day at a time, one truth at a time. And that's what this story really is. Not revenge, not triumph, but a truth I had to face head on. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Sometimes, love looks like silence, like a locked door, like walking away when every part of you wants to run back. And sometimes, that's the most honest version of love there is. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you love because staying meant losing yourself, this story is for you. Tell us in the comments. Can betrayal ever be forgiven, or are some lessons meant to leave scars? Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that dig deep into the heart of family, boundaries, and self-preservation. See you soon in the next story.